It's a pleasure to do this interview with you. Let me just start with a bit of background about myself. My name is Jonah McIntire. I'm a supply chain manager looking at sort of global scale issues, particularly around technology. So I draw together, at least in my career, I've drawn together various disciplines and people, usually to address coordination issues in the supply chain, and usually that involves applying technology. I would consider myself more of a technologist than operations, but I've done a little bit of both. And very recently I began working for the software solution provider GT Nexus after they acquired a company that I helped found building next generation transport planning engines. So what I'm going to talk to you about today though is about my book that came out in January 2014 on supply chain visibility. I'll tell you a little bit about why the book would be considered important. Supply chain visibility as a topic just has little or no neutral materials out there. There's no place for industry participants to discuss what's happening in this particular space outside of a provider's space. So for younger professionals or for those who are in emerging markets, they're at a huge disadvantage. The industry norm is that you learn about supply chain visibility through experience, work experience, or from word of mouth through the people around you who you have work experience. So the only published materials that were previously available are more marketing pieces from software or consulting vendors. And those have their usage, but they're hardly neutral, and they really don't offer very much depth either. So for several years, I've been publishing a fairly successful blog on supply chain visibility, and that called enough attention that a book seemed appropriate. And based on reaction so far, it seems to fill a niche in professional education and academic literature that people in this industry are hungry for. Yeah, so to give some examples of what's discussed in the book and what is it about, the book traces the arch of supply chain visibility starting from concept and then going through theoretical perspectives, and it gets onto hands-on aspects. Strange as it sounds, for a lot of readers, they just want to start with a good definition of supply chain visibility because the term itself is very often kind of little agreed upon. It's a little too vague. One of the more valuable aspects of the book is a framework for scorecarding visibility solutions. That's something that any professional who's working in this space is going to need to know, but it's really missing from public materials. So if you're, again, a younger professional or working in an emerging market and you don't have access to someone with, or direct access to someone with experience, you're just not going to know how to scorecard visibility solutions next to each other. And we also need that framework for scoring visibility solutions for other reasons. You want to be able to compare solutions or updates to solutions, but you also want to be able to predict how external factors or changes in the market or technology are going to affect the solution's performance. And again, unless you can scorecard it and decompose visibility in that way, then you really can't, you can't understand or predict what those trends will do. To give some examples about how the contents of the book can be put in action, we could look at how a company goes about acquiring visibility. That's definitely one of the drivers for reading the book, is someone who's in the midst of trying to acquire visibility. There's basically 4 paths to acquiring visibility, and the book goes through each 4. So the first is you can build it in-house or hire someone to build it for you. And the second is that you can purchase an existing software package, technology package. And third is you can subscribe to a service-oriented technology. And then the fourth is that you can get it as a perk of being a customer of a logistics service provider. So that's build, buy, rent, or use as a perk. And those are really your options. In the book, we go through each approach and then talk about the broad experience that kind of shows their strengths and weaknesses, and who are some of the more important providers or methods to getting that kind of supply chain visibility. The other thing the book does is it goes through 8 really different types, but common types of supply chain visibility, such as the focus on inbound supply chain flows, material flows, versus, say, mobile decision-making while you're distributing goods. These 8 types aren't exhaustive, but they provide a broad understanding of what's being done with visibility solutions in the field today. So regarding recommendations or trends that I see, probably the 3 most important trends as regards to supply chain visibility out there are the rise of distributed manufacturing, such as 3D printing or the maker movement. The second would be the explosion of artificial intelligence or applied artificial intelligence. And the third would be to the switch over to the Internet of Things. So distributed manufacturing as a movement is going to reshape what a supply chain is and the skills that are needed to manage it. It's just as impactful to our field as containerization was to transportation or the appearance of free trade agreements to sourcing. The explosion of artificial intelligence is going to be very disruptive to supply chain visibility because it's going to change both the decision mechanics, so who's making a decision, as well as how data is exchanged and integrated. So if you think about today, much of the work is done to standardize data and integrate it with some other data object. And this is what you'd call an ontology matching problem. So if I say that there's a shipment and you say there's a shipment, we need to make sure that we agree on what that word is, that word shipment. We need to agree on what that represents before we can do things like exchange status updates, right? But as artificial intelligence becomes more robust, that's mostly going to be done by dialogue rather than standardization. So just like 2 human beings today can call each other up on the phone and eventually agree on what a shipment is, eventually the 2 AI software packages will be able to agree on what a shipment is without standardization. They're just going to do it by dialogue. And then the last trend I see is really critical is the move from the Internet of Humans to an Internet of Things. So human-to-human data exchange on the Internet is going to become a tiny fraction of the data volumes. For every kilobyte of email or voicemail or photo sharing, there's going to be maybe 100 kilobytes of data that's created by a device and it goes to another device without a human being ever seeing it. The book is targeted at professionals who are likely to work on visibility projects that don't have deep expertise yet. There's really 2 main groups of those. It's younger professionals and also professionals of all ages who are in developing markets where the whole company, maybe everyone in the company is on their first time exposure to a visibility project. It's also maybe useful to professionals who have more experience with visibility, but it's been in one particular type and they want a broader domain understanding. So with that, I'll just close, say thanks again, Dustin, for the interview.